All right. Yeah, let's do this. So, hello and welcome everyone to this live event, C-suite panel, and we're here to talk about how to create meeting efficiency in organizations, how to reduce meeting bloat, and there's a lot of stuff to talk about today. It's actually a very hot topic. I would say over the last 2 years. I mean, especially since COVID, one of the things that happened is organizations everywhere started to have a lot more meetings. And so this has actually been a topic that has always been an issue. Meetings have always been an issue, but since COVID, it's just become so much more of an issue. And as a result, most companies are, once you get past a certain stage, most companies are doing some sort of active thinking about it. And if they're not, basically, I would say like the bandwidth of those organizations starts to get consumed. And so today we have some amazing guests who are leading organizations, and they encountered some of the problems that I just mentioned, and they've gone ahead and they've done things about it. So it's going to be a really exciting discussion. I'm sure that you're all going to learn a lot. I think the panelists will all learn from each other as well. And to begin, I thought maybe a good place to start is just to go around very quickly and for everyone to introduce themselves and maybe just tell us who you are, what company you work at, and what the company does. So I'm just going to go in order of the panelists on my screen. Michael, you're first. And also tell us where you're located.
I'm first. I get to go first and set the tempo here. Okay. I will keep it brief then. I'm Michael Koenig. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Tucows, which is a public company based in Toronto, although I am located in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And Tucows, what we do is we have three lines of business. The first is domains, so domain names, and this goes back to when domain names really first started. We've been doing it for a long time. The next line of business is Ting Fiber, which is a fiber internet company across the United States in about 22 cities now, just launching in Memphis as well. And the last is Wavelo, which is a telecom SaaS that powers communication service providers like Dish Network, for instance. So, and I sit at the parent company level, which we lovingly call TCX, providing shared services to all of our operating businesses so they can do what they do best of sales, marketing, and product. And I have to drop at the half-hour mark, so sorry. And I think I just chatted for the entire half hour. So great being here.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, thanks for the intro there. And I certainly remember Tucows from the early days of the internet. It's amazing how many things it does. And so yeah, super excited to chat with you. So next we'll go to Rebecca.
Hey, thanks for having me here. So I'm Rebecca, CEO, co-founder of Dealmaker, which is a fintech company. We are making it easier for people to raise capital digitally. So everybody knows when they go to raise money for their business, they can raise from a VC or they can raise from a broker. What a lot of people don't know is they can also market their offering digitally and raise capital that way. So we like to say we're making it as easy to sell shares online as it is to sell shoes online.
That's awesome. Love it. And so next we'll go to Jeff.
Hi, I'm Jeff Sullivan. I'm Chief Technology Officer at Consensus Cloud Solutions. We're traded on the NASDAQ as CCSI. We've been around as part of other entities for more than 20 years. We spun out on our own in 2021. So we've been part of a publicly traded entity for the past 20 years, but on our own as an entity since 21. We are in the healthcare interoperability space more than anything. We have a number of product lines, including many of the industry-leading cloud fax solutions like eFax, also intelligent data extraction in our Clarity product. And mostly what we do is we talk about our vision being providing life's essential data when, where, and how you need it. And that's the easiest summary that we can come up with, which is really moving data around securely and reliably, really globally. We're a global entity officed in 6 different countries with business all around the world. and I am in Los Angeles, which is where our headquarters is.
That's awesome. Very cool. And finally, Matt.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Yes, I'm Matt. I'm the CEO, co-founder of Ably. We also move data around, Jeff, but in a different way. We're a real-time data experience platform. Our customers are developers, so we provide effectively APIs and SDKs for them to deliver real-time experiences. A bit like, in this Zoom sort of webinar we're on now, the sort of chats on the side, or the fact that we can see each other powering those sort of features. So we work with some very large companies like HubSpot, NASCAR, Man City, Toyota, delivering, big sports events, or collaborative software, a bit like Fellow as well, the sort of collaboration type features. We power a lot of those sort of things. And we're operating at some pretty big internet scale now. We're reaching about 1 billion devices a month. So it's nice big numbers. Yeah, and we're headquartered in London. I'm in the office today, but I'm based in France, in the Alps.
That's awesome.
And one final thing, Michael, Tucows, yes, it brings back a lot of good memories from way back in the day. I'm from South Africa originally, and I remember Tucows even back in the day before I left South Africa. So yeah, it's great to have you on.
Fabulous. Love it.
It's amazing to see, just a brand thrive for that long a period of time, continue growing. So that's awesome. So why don't we start, just as an icebreaker to get things going. I thought we could go around, and I'll kind of randomize who goes first to get everybody on their toes. So first question is like, just starting out with, is there a a pet peeve that you have for meetings? Is there something that, you get parachuted into an organization and you see something happening and you just can't stand it? Is there anything like that? We'll go to Matt first.
I think pet peeve is just no agenda and throw people together to try and solve a problem. It just never seems to work remotely. I'd say even in person that works, doesn't work very well, but certainly remotely doesn't work. Just sort of we've only really seemed to have success when people have clarity of like what we're trying to achieve. So just lots of people in a meeting with no agenda is a pet peeve of mine. Yeah.
That's awesome. And Michael?
Because there's some construction going on. I don't see it too often anymore, but people walking on treadmills during meetings with their camera on, I find it really nauseating. And I get it. Let's kill some birds with stones and get some exercise in. But that's the unique pet peeve. But I also echo Matt, getting into a meeting, not having an agenda and knowing what we're doing.
All right. And Rebecca?
I spend a lot of my day in meetings, so my pet peeve, we try to do 20 minutes or 50 minutes. So when meetings go over time like that, I don't get a break between meetings, get up, go to the washroom, clear my head. I think that's really important to have that mental break between meetings. So yeah, that's my pet peeve, when people try to push it past the 50 minutes all the way to the hour.
All right. And Jeff?
So kind of alluded to by Matt, but too many people in a meeting. Nothing drives me crazier than seeing an invite with 20 or 30 people on it, because I know that 4 or 5 people are going to be the only ones who talk in the entire meeting. And I just see the dollar sign racking up and realize, what people could be doing versus what they're doing now.
Yeah, that definitely is a big one. One of the ones that I remember from back when, everybody was in offices, and that was like, the main way of working was, there was almost like this artificial limit of how many meetings could happen within a company because there was only so many meeting rooms. And since that artificial limit, well, that real limit, was taken away, now there's like, everybody has the power to begin a meeting anywhere and usurp time from different people within the organization. If you think about that, that's a really dangerous thing. They can just, with a click of a button, the ease of which we can do this thing has has caused a lot more of it to happen, and for potentially not everyone to think it through super responsibly. So why don't we start here? So one of the things is that you've all, what you all have in common is you've all, recognized that meetings are something that you need to get a handle on, and you've all created meeting policies within your organizations that kind of talk about how meetings should happen. And you've all kind of like implemented a bunch of these things and changed meeting culture within your companies. So one of the things that maybe I wanted to start with is, how did you know that this was something that, required your attention? And the interesting thing is that this is like very much at the highest levels of the organization, right? Like this is the C-suite getting involved in meetings. And so the question is, what happened, Michael, at Tucows that prompted you to even, think about this? How did this grab your attention?
Well, I got to give a lot of credit to the team, because I shared the sort of the structure where we have this parent and then three subsidiaries. One of the things that we like to do, whether it's with meetings, whether it's with the SaaS you use, whether it's with policies that you create that don't really affect the parent company, we like to give people a certain amount of flexibility and freedom to create their own policy, because we don't want to necessarily shove things down their throat. I think Ting has done the best job of this. I've had nothing to do with it. But they really have, I'd say, more than any of our other businesses, a pretty great meeting framework. I'll admit we're currently working with Aiden, your team. We're a fellow customer, and we're currently working with your team to see how we can do meeting policies better. One of the things that and I'll just say there are two things that I've implemented in terms of how to conduct really great meetings. And the first is something that I snagged from the Entrepreneur's Operating System, EOS. I'm not crazy about EOS, but they do have this thing called level 10 meetings, and it's a very strict sort of meeting agenda where you spend X amount of time doing this, then you move on, you spend X amount of time doing this. And the one part that's the best is they call IDS. You identify, discuss, and then solve problems. And these are the biggest, hairiest problems that you and your team are dealing with. And so creating the structure and also the environment and atmosphere to be able to do that, I think is really effective. Now, whether or not people are going to use that same meeting structure elsewhere, leave it to them. So we do want to offer that freedom and flexibility.
All right, awesome. So it sounds like it was something that bubbled up from within the organizations. It sounded like at Ting there was just, you just saw the excellence there, and then having the ability to transfer some of the good practices from one company to the other. That's kind of where it bubbled up. Matt, you're the CEO. How did this how did this grab your attention?
I mean, as an organization, we started out remote first. We sort of went to being in an office, then we went back to being remote first during COVID. And I think maybe our approach to solving this might have been slightly unique in that we had good ideas around what looked like a good meeting, or why we should have meetings and how to, sort of set clear expectations of what we're doing in those meetings. And, we got a people team who helped sort of set structures for things like how we do effective one-on-ones and, different cadences of, check-ins versus quarterly reviews and all those sort of stuff. I think we had all of that in place. What I found, and maybe being a bit more from a more technical background, was we didn't have the tooling. So, and I know everyone, you generally don't want to start with tooling. Like tooling is rarely the problem. It's actually the process or why you want to do things. But actually it did start becoming a problem. Tooling really did become. We didn't have a consistent way of setting agendas. We didn't know if people were setting agendas. We had no way of knowing if one-on-ones were being run the way we thought they were, if people had templates or they're using templates. And you don't want to micromanage. You don't want to be sort of really checking in individually on everyone and what they're doing. So it was a tooling issue. It was primarily a tooling. So for me, it started with I started to see inefficiencies in the meetings I was attending. And so it was, I think it was unique and it was me literally, trying out Fellow and working with and suddenly it was transformational. Um and and so I think it was less about that we knew, we wanted to kind of what we wanted to do. It was the fact that we didn't seem to be able to run the meetings the way we anticipated. So that was our entry into it. That was the problem. Right? And I do remember going to meetings where it felt like you had to you want to be nice, right? So you have to sort of if one person used a Google Doc, you use their Google Doc, and another person used Asana because they wanted to do it as a list of tasks, and another person, and everyone had their own way of doing things, and you don't want to be create friction, so you try and adapt to everyone's different way of doing things. But it just was such a waste of time and really hard to work. So that was how we came at it. That was the main problem we tried to solve. Yeah.
Okay, so it sounded like you were going to meetings and then experiencing suboptimal meetings, and then you just decided to do something about it yourself and just make it happen. Rebecca, was it the same for you? Like, was this like you went to meetings and experienced it, or was it something that the team brought to your attention?
Yeah, for us, it was the team very much was very vocal about wanting it because some of our team had used it in past organizations and so really saw the power of the tool. So we definitely had knew that we had too many meetings going on and we were trying as an organization to move to more communication through writing rather than always just calling a meeting to discuss it to come to the outcome. We were really trying to see if we could work more asynchronously and it's Fellows really helped us do that because the meeting notes are there in the tool, and so you can, if someone's away, they can watch the video or they can read the notes or you can share the notes or the to-dos are listed. So it's really, as Matt said, the tooling is really important for us in making that shift to not having so many meetings. I'm a big fan, as Michael pointed out, of the level 10 meeting. We also use the 4 Ps for our meetings. So we had those little techniques to drive efficiency. The 4 Ps work really well where it's a smaller meeting than a level 10. We were trying to run, 20-minute and 50-minute meetings, but ultimately the team just said, look, we've used this before. This is going to level us up. And so we did, and it did.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it sounds like it came from the team, but you also had a sense for what great meetings look like. But it also seemed like as a like from your perspective, you wanted to do more things asynchronously. And so that was one of the drivers was like, how do we get more people to think, this should be asynchronous? Jeff, from your perspective, I mean, you run engineering. How did this come on to how did just the concept that you had to do something about meetings make its way to you?
So for us, it's fundamentally about efficiency and effectiveness, right? And I don't want to sound like the reactive guy who says I run more than engineering, but my group is the product technology group. So it's product management, it's PMO, it's operations, it's a whole bunch of things. And there's a lot of disparate people in that group that have very different perspectives, very different interaction styles. And we're, the us and the GTM group are the two largest groups. We're 85% of the company between us. And so we're constantly having to interact multidisciplinarily. And symptom-wise, you see these meetings getting bigger and bigger, and there being more and more of them, and you feel like almost all of the day is sucked up into meetings now, and you ask yourself at a certain point, when is the work getting done? If all of these key people are in meetings all the time. And so that was sort of the germ of it. But then COVID really sparked for us a desire. We had to go remote. We said, very intentionally, how can we be a better company at working asynchronously? Because we were such a very in-office oriented company. And even though we're multinational with offices everywhere, and therefore, that no matter where you are, there's a bunch of people that are coming in from, I don't know, Dublin or Ottawa or Tokyo. So on the one hand, you have to be good remote, but COVID really was a forcing function for us to say everybody kind of distributed, went remote. And so we very intentionally went about and said, how can we be more asynchronous? And that means that meetings have to be more efficient and effective, but you also know, being distributed across the world, really, that it's very hard to find times that everybody can meet in. So just not having to find that golden hour when, Matthew can come, as well as, the person in Los Angeles, you end up having like 2 or 3 hours a day where you can reasonably expect to meet, and everything else is just, well, Matthew can't make it, or Jeff can't make it, or Michael can't make it, or Rebecca can't make it. And so we try to get better at being more asynchronous. From my perspective, that pet peeve of mine, the 30 people in the meeting and 5 of them are talking, those other 25 were there either because they wanted to hear what was going on, or maybe something would come up that was relevant to them or wouldn't, or they were being brought in by somebody else. And we wanted to give those people, kind of take away the FOMO, have that ability to make people be educated and informed about what was going on without feeling like I need to take big time out of my schedule to do it. Or even worse, in many ways, I'm multitasking, so I'm not really paying attention to this meeting, but I'm in it. So I'm not giving my full attention to the work, not giving my full attention to the meeting, and sort of, halfway doing both of those things. And those were all just symptoms that my senior leadership team saw as well. And we were all kind of dissatisfied with it. But for us, the forcing function was absolutely COVID and the need to go remote, and really a desire to be more efficient and effective. And we've largely stayed remote. Various groups within our organization have gone hybrid, but we're already fully distributed. During COVID, we took advantage of hiring people no matter where they were, so we could hire the best people anywhere rather than having to look at locuses near offices. And it's really kind of you can't unring that bell. So given that you're embracing the notion that you're largely remote organization, even if you're somewhat hybrid, you've got to get better at this. And for us, it really was, how can we have fewer, more effective meetings?
Love it. And so this was actually, it sounds like your executive team were all talking about this, especially with COVID. But was it you that, kind of like put your hand down and said, we're
So
doing something about this? But did you lead the initiative?
I did. I'm a big process person. I had implemented, death by meeting, a decade or two ago at various places. So I always think about how can we be more effective? And it really, I always like to say, all of my process thinking comes out of being inherently lazy. And so I look for ways to be more effective at things. I think, Matthew, you said you don't start with tools, but at some point you realize that what's holding you back is an ability to actually implement the processes that you've got. And tools are able to help that. I'm a big believer that you always start with paper. You figure out how to do something, and then you look for a tool that lets you do that more efficiently, rather than trying to find a tool and then, wrapping yourself around that. But, for us, it was really about, okay, how can we systemize this? Because you've got people at all various levels of maturity around how to operate meetings and how to interact with people. And you want to give them the right toolkit so that they can be more effective without having to become experts in all of this stuff before they can do it. And the right kind of guidance and tooling that takes especially the grunt work away from it is a huge factor. So much of it for us was, how can I tell if our people are setting agendas? How can I tell how many people are in meetings, right? And the ability to get tooling that helps me get those insights without heavy lift was a big deal for us. And so, we did a lot of work looking at the tooling after we decided what we wanted our meeting culture, what we wanted our meeting process to be like. And that's really kind of how we worked on that. So it was definitely approach first and tool second. But you never find anything that's a perfect fit for what you want. You want something that really enables you to be how you want to be and is customizable enough that it can support you where you need the support.
Love it. So one thing I want to mention to everybody listening in is there is a Q&A section that you can start adding your questions into. And I know that Michael has to leave very shortly. Michael, you've worked at a bunch of, basically your background has been remote work. You were early employee also at Automatic, which is, creates WordPress. You've worked at a number of remote companies. What have you done to actually like tackle the meeting problem? You talked about, for example, the level 10 meeting template. What are some practical things that you start doing or you've seen your companies start doing to actually tackle the problem? And I think you're on mute.
How about now? Are we good?
Good.
All right. Sorry about that. It's funny because back in the early days of Automatic, there really weren't very many meetings. We worked, and this is dating it 2006, 2008, right? We were still using old school IRC. So the majority of it is the majority of the conversation is one, entirely asynchronous, and two, accessible by all. Now, this was also when we used Skype, right? When Skype was like the way you had any sort of phone interact or voice interaction. It wasn't even video. So that started to become a bit more of a thing. But still, the default was always to asynchronous communication. And it's funny, back then we always said that if video ever got introduced, we'd quit because none of us wanted to put on pants. Of course, we didn't really think that, oh, if we just have the video, here, you can still not wear pants. Some of the things that we've just kind of got ahead with moving forward is always that agenda. And I think Amazon's kind of a little bit extreme, right? Where you write up the 6-page doc and everyone has to read it before a meeting, but at least giving people a pre-read whenever possible. Hey, here's what we're going to be discussing. Here's the agenda, but also here's the supporting documentation, right? Here's a slide deck. Here's a doc so that we can all come to the table with some sort of educated approach and also already have the context to be able to not just get informed, but actually make decisions. And I think that's a key. Is this a meeting to discuss, or is it a meeting to make a decision? So those kind of picked up over time as video meetings and the need within a remote culture started to adapt to the technology. So really kind of an interesting sort of genesis throughout the decades.
Love it. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I know you have to drop off, but thank you for attending.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, everyone. It's one of those meetings that I have to jump to that you can't get out of. So meetings still dominate and dictate the daily life. But Aidan, thanks so much for having me, and Jeffrey, Rebecca, Matthew. Great to connect.
Nice to meet
And
you.
hopefully folks found this useful. I look forward to watching the recording of everything else. So
All right. So next, what I wanted to do is let's talk about meeting policy. So again, you've all come into this, with some ideas on there's something to fix. You have an idea to fix it. Usually, tooling can help, but a lot of it is process, is culture. It's because you're changing the way people are operating. We talk a lot about company culture. We have things like values. But there's also this thing called meeting culture, which is the things that we often do as it relates to meetings. And the problem is, just like with any sort of culture, if you don't set your culture and say these are our values and this is how we do things here, every time you hire someone, they bring their culture, and before you know it, it's just like a hodgepodge of all sorts of things. And the same thing is true for meetings. If you don't kind of say this is how we do things, then every new person you hire will bring their way, and then you won't have a common way. And so you've all created these meeting policies. And one thing which would be cool, and you can think about, I won't put you on the spot, but these are amazing resources. I've read all of your meeting policies, and they're all slightly different. And it would be really cool if I think like the attendees would love to see this stuff. So you can think about that if it's something that you're willing to share, or a redacted version or whatever else. I think it would make really make it very helpful for people to kind of learn from it. I wanted to start with Matt. So Matt, in looking at your meeting policy, I mean, there's a lot of really amazing things in there. One is I wanted to ask you about, how did you put it together? Like, did was it one of those, you got really inspired, stayed late into the night and wrote it? Was it collaborative? And one other thing I wanted to point out from yours specifically is where it starts is, do we even need a meeting? And there's a flow chart. Like, you actually have a graphical flow chart of like how to make the decision of whether something should be a meeting or something else. I'd love for you to describe that as well, but floor is yours.
Yeah, I mean, look, it has been a collaborative effort, and I think the thing that we have found interesting is we have tried to be a written first organization and remote first, right? So that was always our belief that it's a lot of, a lot of things can be solved by writing something down, then coming together, discussing it. Um, what's been interesting is we've also sort of found that that's just not a rule that we want to enforce, because we found, with a written first approach, we can have such a slow cycle time between someone writing something, getting feedback, going back and forth, these endless Reddit-like threads of conversations going on. And so it's felt like it has to be a bit fluid. And I think where we get to is, as soon as our written first approach, which is our preference, starts to slow down, then a meeting is the way to kind of move that forward. So, getting people together to discuss things is absolutely the most efficient way of sharing information very quickly. So, we've just continued to evolve this, the way that we've, understood when you need a meeting, when you don't need a meeting. But I think we have rotated back. Like, we actually sort of err on the side of, if it feels slow, then the way to move quickly is not more written stuff. It's it's getting onto a call. So the things that we are starting to do that I think have helped is, we have decision records inside the business. So every time a decision gets made, we make sure that's written up, that's shared, that saves. That means, you're radiating out the information effectively to the organization. We have things like request for comment. So that's a proposal of, I've got an idea, it could be anything. And an RFC often is a quick way of putting some idea out and then getting feedback. But again, often jumping on a meeting is the quickest way to really debate that. And I think a lot of our focus has been on, also around the control of how much information radiates out. When we first started, we were small, so we operate a very open company. I mean, there's pretty much everything is available apart from some personnel records and salaries and things like that. But pretty much everything else, everyone has access to. And we thought it was great, and because everything just gets published out. But the problem is actually people just drown in information, and that actually becomes, it slows everyone down, and there's a lot. So we've increasingly started to think about, bringing people together, and how do you radiate that information out correctly to the organization. And I know, Fellow having AI tools now embedded in it. We're using a various, that is helping us a lot. We're enabling now a lot of people not to attend meetings, because they can just read the notes, the summarized notes from an AI from AI in a meeting. Then they can jump in and have a listen, and then they can follow up and kind of get involved with calls. So it's evolving quite quickly, especially with AI. AI is really fundamentally changing that. I know there's also, within the commercial organization, tools like Gong, which I'm sure you've all sort of come across, fundamentally changing how we operate as a business in terms of when you need to go to a meeting, when you don't, how you can listen in, get insights. So I think what we're seeing right now is quite a radical shift in how we're going to use tools to reduce how much time we spend in meetings, and how we can distribute that information out, more effectively. And I know your question was, how do we come up with our meeting policies? Well, it's evolving, and everyone's contributing, and everything for us sits in effectively like a wiki internally, and everyone can do propose a change to it, and that is exactly what happens all of the time.
Yeah, that's super useful. So it sounds like you started from a place, it was collaborative, and maybe it was like a pendulum. Like maybe you swung a little bit too far this way, and you're like, well, not everything can be super written, and then it went a little bit back, and it's still evolving. And that makes a lot of sense. It also seems like a key issue for you was, communicating decisions that come from a meeting. I find this idea of like a decision log super fascinating. Like, how does that work? Is that a Slack channel where I have decided that it just gets posted there? Or like, how does that work? The radiating of decisions?
It's a bit more formal. So we have, each department has their own decision log, and even each decision has an ID number. So it kind of, chronological list of decisions. And uh, each team is kind of effectively decide what's appropriate in terms of the information they share. But it saves a lot of us just constantly revisiting the same problems over and over again. New person starts in the company. Why did you do that? Yeah. And you sort of have the same conversation of, yep, I know that doesn't seem obvious, but here's the legacy of why we did that. It also, what's fascinating is allows someone to then challenge a decision that was made that maybe was appropriate 5 years ago, but is no longer appropriate, as opposed to everyone going, no, that's the way we've always done it. And everyone's asked about that before. Don't try and change it. Well, actually, no, they can, because they can say, yeah, but your rationale for that for 5 years ago is no longer valid. So no, we've gone quite formal on that, and that's very much our sort of written first approach. As you said, though, we rotated too far, and then decision records started becoming what I would say is more for collaboration. They became these sort of you wanted to kind of show all the different options that you considered. And actually, that wasn't the point of the decision record. The decision record was a record of why you made a decision. So we did kind of rotate a bit deeper. There's always an oscillation, I think, in the organization of these things are great. Then they're slowing us down. These things are great. So it's just trying to find that balance. But I can't stress how valuable it is to have these in place. And again, going back to the AI tooling and things that you can apply into meetings now, it's just quicker to get these things out. So it's pretty it's a good time to be around. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's super interesting. I mean, this is one of the, Michael mentioned this before he left, but the EOS template, like one of the things about it is they always have like you can always have a section for cascading decisions. Okay, meeting is done. Who needs to know about the things that happened here? And then you're right. Now AI can be like, oh, grab a clip and send it to them. But like from a process perspective, that's super, super important. And I love how the decision log, it sounds like it's a lot of work, but I can see how it actually speeds up the company over the course of time. Whole bunch of conversations that maybe don't need to happen because that exists. Rebecca, I'd like to ask you the same question as well, which is like, how did the meeting policy come together for you? And also, one of the things that I've noticed in your meeting policy, which was super interesting, is you've actually outlined the types of meetings that can happen in the company. And you even have templates for if you're doing this type of meeting, like, here's your template. This type of meeting, here's your template. So yeah, we'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I think like Matthew said, the meeting policy evolved over time as we started to have different needs as an organization, and it's always fluid and moving forwards and then backwards. Sometimes it feels like, but we found, when COVID first happened, okay, every team cameras on needs a morning stand up for everybody to get the juices flowing. And so we very quickly defined a template for what should happen in a morning stand up and what the outcome for the leaders who are owning those stand-ups should be. And then we found that there was a lot of meetings and they were sometimes veering off in different directions. I know that was one of the questions. How do you bring it back? Our culture is very blunt. If you feel the meeting's off track, you say, guys, this meeting's off track, get it back on track. And so we introduced the 4 Ps, which is you're supposed to reject a meeting invite if it doesn't have the 4 Ps in it. So what's the purpose of the meeting? Who are the people who need to attend? A lot of times that will help the person sending the invite think through who they're actually inviting and do they need to be there, or are there some people that are just superfluous that are going to sit there and they could actually read the notes afterwards. And then the process that you're going to run as the meeting owner. And then what's the product? The most important part to me is, what are we trying to end the meeting with? Is it a document? Is it a decision? And let's make sure that the meeting gets there at the end. So that was something that we introduced fairly early on. One-on-ones, I think we're still constantly struggling with and evolving. So having the Fellow templates has really helped, because there are different things that you can try to accomplish in a one-on-one. And then we have different structures we introduced called task force and special ops. So named after the Navy SEALs, when you have cross-departmental collaborations, structures that really help define what the purpose of that cross-departmental collaboration is. Task force is something that's going to be going on for a longer period of time. A special op is something that we're going to spin up, have a defined goal, and then we're going to shut it down, and we're going to shut down the Slack channels and everything associated when it's done. So any kind of frameworks that we can introduced to help people contextualize, okay, I'm in this meeting because it's a special op. I know what the purpose of the special op is. I know from the 4Ps what the purpose of this meeting within the context of the special op is. We can really try to drive forward action out of meetings because, you know, at Dealmaker, we've got a lot of A players who are very impatient. And if they have to sit in a long meeting that's kind of meandering, it doesn't go well.
Yeah, I love that. I like that distinction, and it's really cool to have stuff like that, and the type of language. Because one of the things I find is that just having common language, just being able to say something as special ops or task force, it really allows everybody to get on the same page much faster, and then you start to understand what that means and what are the principles. So, yeah, that's a really cool approach. Jeff, wanted to ask you the same question, which is, how did your meeting policy come together? Who wrote it? And I also wanted to just point out in yours, you have a pretty extensive section just talking about asynchronous work. Just like extending into many other things that are not meetings. And so, yeah, we'd love to hear your perspective as well.
Yeah. So for us, it was very much a collaborative effort. We went out, we researched because we knew that we were going into more of a remote setting. We went and we researched companies that were remote first or remote only. For many of us, while we had distributed organization, we weren't really used to being remote. So we really wanted to be intentional about it and look out there. And there are a number of terrific resources online and a bunch of not so helpful ones, but some great resources. GitLab in particular has an amazing corpus of knowledge around how they work as a fully distributed organization. So we borrowed heavily from a lot of things that were out there in the world, but we also looked at what felt right for our particular company culture and the values that we held. And I think that you'd said something earlier, Aiden, that's really powerful to me, which is the intentionality of things, that explicitly defining your culture rather than allowing it to be defined by accident. Everything happens via inertia unless you exert pressure on things. So we really wanted to be very intentional about this. And so we had a much larger group that we took our senior leadership and our plus ones and plus twos, and we fielded a group of people who had the passion. And Matthew, to your point, I want to be more writing first than we are, but we knew that this was going to be a very research and writing intensive process to document all of this. So we created something that we call our grimoire, which is an extensive set of Google documents that's sort of like a wiki, but we had been moving away from, I don't want to name drop a Confluence, but we were moving away from Confluence at the time. We had been adopting Google Meet, so we said we can do this in a set of Google documents. So we have this folder, which is the grimoire, and it's kind of our codex of everything that we have about processes and people and procedures and projects, and part of that was a whole bunch of stuff around how do we work efficiently remotely, how do we intentionally have meetings, what are the key principles that everybody should be following when they set meetings, what do we value and what do we not value, and why why is it that we value things like the steel man approach as opposed to the straw man approach, and these kinds of things were put out there in a very intentional and written way because we wanted it to be very concrete and specific as opposed to sort of an oral tradition, because that drifts very quickly. So what we think about when we think about much more of these things being asynchronous was that strong intentionality to say, look, we're globally distributed. It's really hard to find times to get things done synchronously. So how can we be more and more effective asynchronously? And it's 100% a work in progress. But the advantage for us is that, Matthew, much like your group, the grimoire is open to editing for everybody. We have sort of a review and approval process. So we view it as anybody can contribute, but somebody's going to review that and make sure that it's kind of consistent with what we have. But we're very much open to people questioning why our policies what they are, and that's why the grimoire exists, is to explain why we value these things, why we believe in X or Y versus an equally valid other approach. And one of the things that I personally believe in is the notion of sort of mental overhead. And there are a variety of different models that you can use for meetings, but what I don't want people to be doing is spending any mental horsepower choosing between multiple equally valid ways to do things. I want to say this is how we do things. And there are other ways that could do them. This is good enough or optimal for us for whatever reason. So this is how you do it. Use your mental energy to be creative within that framework rather than coming up with an equally valid but different framework or debating, do we put, semicolons or colons? We just have a standard, and that standard frees you up to not worry about the mechanics and worry more about the content or the creativity. So that's kind of how we went about this, and very much a living document, very much a collaborative process. And we're constantly evaluating. I would say we eternally fall short of our ideals, but we keep striving in that direction. And the nice thing about the living documents is that everybody's free to question, is there a better way? But it's all about proposal. So for us, you propose a way to fix it. You don't just complain about what's not working well. And I think that orientation on solutions is one of our core values. And so we try to live it in everything that we do, including how we set our policies, how we evolve our policies, and how we hold each other accountable for living up to those things.
Yeah, that's awesome. It sounds like it almost works in an open source way. You make a request for a change, but it can get approved. It might not. There might be some revisions to it. One question I was going to ask you, Jeff, is do you have a sense for whether it's working? Like, do you feel that you've been able to, like, how do you know that you've been able to make the changes in the culture? And again,
Yeah.
it's always a process, but
Yeah.
do you
So
know that you're making progress?
a terrific question, and I wish I had a better answer than so we've started doing a lot of surveying of our people, right? Because it's all starts anecdotally with feedback that you're getting. I do skip levels fairly religiously. I try to get through the organization and hear more from people that aren't my direct reports or that my senior leadership team. And one of the things that we ask about is what could we be doing better? What's working well? And so there's that anecdotal, but we've started to do explicit pulse surveys and other instruments that allow people in a more anonymous way to give feedback about what's working well and what's not working well. And I would say there's definitely momentum in the right direction. I want things to move faster than they do. I always want that. And so I recognize that I'm always going to be sort of eternally dissatisfied, but I want to see progress. And this is the key that I try to promote to my teams is take a moment from time to time and just think back to a year ago and compare it. And when you stop and think about it, you realize how far you've come, right? When you're doing a step at a time, you don't notice, but sometimes you turn and you look behind you and say, oh, I remember when I was way back there and now we're here. And that can help give you some of that sense of the progress, because with incremental improvements, sometimes you can lose track of your progress. So being more intentional about that is important for us. Uh, have we seen improvement in this? Yes. Are we a asynchronous work ninja organization? Absolutely not. We're still way more heavily reliant on meetings than I would like, and it's a constant pressure for us to say, how can they be more efficient and effective? And this is where I think we find that tools like Fellow that allow us to radiate that information takes away certain of these reasons why we weren't making progress. Some of it was not necessarily FOMO, but I'd like to understand why a decision was made, right? And I like the idea of the decision register. Where I despair is our ability for people, as a multinational organization, we don't have all English language native speakers, and some people are much better or worse at writing, right? I happen to love writing. I'm a real strong believer in a writing first idea. We've been pushing that, but we have questions of equity and accessibility in that we're still struggling to figure out what the right solution is. But for me, it's really about pulling the organization, pulling my senior leadership to say, on the one hand, do we feel like we're more effective? And then how can you justify and quantify that feeling?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I feel like with all the latest and greatest AI models, it's becoming easier for everyone to become a better writer. So
Yeah.
so that's it. Just very quickly, maybe like 15 seconds each. Matt and Rebecca, are you doing the same thing? You're doing surveys to kind of figure out if there's progress, or are you doing something different than that? Maybe Rebecca first.
We are not. I like the idea of looking back on where you were a year ago, because I can tell you, it was a bigger mess than it is today. But I think survey is a great idea. We just are really just more ad hoc, constantly evolving the process based on what we feel the organization needs.
And Matt?
Yeah, we do quite a lot. I mean, I wouldn't we run we use Culture Amp. So Culture Amp is we run these internally across the organization. It's more of like sort of engagement survey, but it gives us an opportunity by department to surface how people are feeling about everything from culture to, teamwork, productivity, enablement, recognition, all sorts of aspects within the organization. And yeah, I mean it's moving forward. So you can't, I mean, I don't want to directly attribute, our meeting policy is responsible for everyone feeling we've got a remote first working policy that everyone thinks is really great, or they're very productive, because that would be, you can't draw those, it's a number of factors. But what we find is that, when people are doing the surveys, they can put in comments about why they said that thing, and often the problems will bubble up. You'll get some feedback on that. So we do, and even at SL, so our senior leadership, I have I just use a Google spreadsheet, a form for the senior leadership every month or 2 months for about that. They just fill in a survey, and one of the questions I have is, how effective are we as a senior leadership team in how we operate. And a lot of that is how we run our meetings, because that's how we spend most of our time in senior leadership. So that helps me at least have the conversation of why is it efficient or not. And I think Fellows actually played a very big part in the senior leadership team, because we have, every Friday, Thursday, we have to write notes async for the leadership team about what we want to do and propose agendas. And that's really helped us just have a bit more structure and push all the stuff that can be done async. And so yeah, no, we and our people team have really sort of done a great job at sort of surveying the team and bubbling that feedback up. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. So we have 6 minutes left, and I want to get through some of the questions from the audience. I'll start with one from Adam. I think this one is for you, Matt. And it says, do you have something to annotate the decision as current? For example, an ADR on adopting a REST API that then gets replaced with a new direction to adopt GraphQL, for example.
Yeah, so ADR, I'm assuming the person asked us, so we have architectural decision records. That's where our decision record started with, and then it's spread into everything across the organizations. Each team have their own decision record. I'm assuming the ADR is an architectural decision record and very poignant in terms of technical. No, we don't actually mark them as current. I don't know why we've never come across that as a problem, but no, we don't. But it's a good suggestion. I might I might ask the team why we don't. Yeah.
All right. So the next question is from Alex, and he says, as a company that is in huge growth spurt mode and in the midst of launching new features and products, the meetings have skyrocketed to quickly identify risks and make decisions. What is your initial advice to move forward towards reducing meetings without slowing the work towards a launch? Does anyone want to take this one?
I'll take that one, because I know exactly, like, that's how we got to too many meetings as well. The growth booms and then everyone's running around trying to do something. So you got to kind of bring a structure to it. So the first thing we did was every department had a Slack channel, internal Slack channel general, on Slack general. There was a submission form. We really tried to push everything into like a standardized way of communicating so that people weren't just randomly calling meetings for everything. So then you could submit a question to a department, like, sounds like for risk there, you could submit a question to risk and get a response versus calling a meeting for it. And then the risk department might have a standard way that they operate, like they reach out to the submitter. But that standardization really gives you that framework to control the meeting skyrocket. And, Fellow and the meeting templates really help with that. So making sure that when people are calling a meeting, there's a specific template that they're forced to use.
Love it. So another question was, how did everyone tackle change management? Was there resistance to the meeting policies when trying to put them into place?
Does anybody not have to struggle with change management? I mean, people are creatures of habit, right? Uh, I think the greatest way to fail in any kind of a change in policy is to not explicitly think about your change management. So for us, we do all hands, we preview things in the all hands, we follow up with leave behinds and read alongs. We then cascade meetings down to individual groups for small group Q&A, because there's nothing worse than organizational inertia to keep new changes from happening. And so I think something I learned early on in my career is that you can never over communicate new ideas. And so you start early, you allow for feedback, but you also push very aggressively on moving it forward. And there's a very robust change management that allows you to kind of push that as aggressively as you can. But of course, you're going to experience inertia, and resistance is really just a form of inertia.
Does anyone
If
else?
I could just quickly answer that one though, I mean, I found interesting about Fellow, maybe more than other tools we've had to roll out, is it feels a bit more viral in nature because it started with me working with my senior leadership team, and then I do all my meetings with them and our team, and then they in turn had actions assigned to them that they needed to sort of manage. So they started running their meetings with their team, and it felt like it didn't feel like suddenly we had the whole company to say you have to from Monday. Now everyone's moving to this tool. It felt more organic and viral in that they would see the benefits of it, and then we didn't have to convince everyone. It was they saw it. It's quite unique that, and most other tools we haven't had that. You had to force it through. So we were, I think, quite lucky in that. Yeah.
All right.
We saw that too. I totally agree with that with Fellow. That was one of the reasons, our engineering team wanted it, and I could see how viral it was. And I said, everybody's going to be on this very quickly because the collaboration is so powerful.
Yeah, I think you get that pull effect, right? If your manager is using it to work with you and you're a people manager, then you want to start habitually using it. And especially that the tool makes it easy to collaborate in that way. So it really does, it produces more of a pull than a push.
Yeah, that's awesome. Change management is always so hard, and it's just like a constant. It's never a one and done. It's like you can't go to the gym one time. You just have to keep keep doing it for a long period of time. So we're getting to the end. I just wanted to say, thank you everyone for attending, and thank you Rebecca, Jeff, and Matt for doing this. Your insights have been awesome. We're just at the parting advice section, so just wanted to go to each of you and see if you have any parting advice, final words for all the attendees here. Rebecca, I'll start with you.
5-minute pre-read. That's one of the best things I think we do is when everyone comes to a meeting, making sure everyone's read the materials so you can actually have a productive discussion.
Love it. And Jeff?
Rebecca stole my thing. Nothing bothers me more than people not doing the homework. So just do the homework. You're there in a meeting for a specific purpose, not necessarily 80% of the time to get updated on something, but to come to a decision of some or other kind. So do the work in advance and don't have a meeting before you're ready.
Love it. Matt?
I think maybe add to the when we talk about having lots of people in a meeting, there is a cultural value to having lots of people to relay that information out to all hands as an example of something that is, I think, quite important. So that's a very different purpose for that meeting, and I think there's cultural value of having those large meetings, but they're not really meetings. They're still broadcast, but they're bringing people together. So there's that. But I think for me, the most important thing is I think people need to come to meetings opinionated, and to do that, you have to be prepared. Because if everyone's opinionated, you can quickly resolve things. If everyone comes to brainstorm without an opinion that they brought beforehand, it's a very, very ineffective meeting as far as I'm concerned.
That's great advice. And we're a minute over, but this has been awesome. Thank you all for attending. And thank you to our panelists. This has been great. And we're obviously going to distribute the recording. And so we'll share this widely very soon. But thank you all for attending, and we'll see you next time.
Thank
Having us.
you.
Right. Thanks for having us on.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye now.